Hi everyone, welcome to Planet Comicon 2013. Nice to have you here for this panel. And this panel is, one more flash, I can't recall the test one. This panel is regarding voice acting. And we're very, very fortunate to have with us today Adrienne Wilkinson and Tom Kane. Give them a hand. I'm sure you know their accomplishments. So I'm going to go over Adrienne to Tom. Tell us about yourself and what you have done. Go to your Mr. lengthy logo or Adrienne.
Wow, thank you for that introduction. I've done lots of video games, probably like 20 or so. I've got a radio show that's like an old-timey, what it is actually is it's a modern-day take on the show Suspense, which is a radio drama from the 1960s. I've done some animation. I like sitting next to Tom. I'm going to take Mojo ripped off on me. I would like to do more. And I'm crossing fingers. I've just done my first voice work in a feature, but I don't know if I've made it cut in the movie yet. I'm holding my breath because that would be very exciting for me. So yeah, voice work wise, that's my spiel.
And you did acting too.
I actually mostly do on-camera stuff. I'm known for being a warrior princess. I've done a lot of genre stuff. Most currently, next week I have a film called Raised that is an action horror movie that's premiering at the Tribeca Festival. I just wrapped season 3 of Venice, which is season 4 of Venice, which is a popular web soap I'm part of. What am I doing right now? In June, I'm shooting Star Trek Renegades, which is an independent Star Trek movie that is about half Star Trek veteran actors and about half newbies. I play Captain Masa Singh. I just read the script and I'm very excited about it. Okay, that's enough to go on.
Mr. Kane.
Oh boy. I'm a lot older than her, so. Starting back at the beginning, I did a bazillion video games. I don't really do them anymore because they're too hard on my throat. There's lots of screaming and dying, so I don't do it. I was Professor Tony in Powerpuff Girls and also him and the Talking Dog. And Foster's Home, I was Mr. Harriman. Mr. Harriman. I'm Professor Tony, of course, as I say. And I, of course, Jedi Master Yoda. Yes, I am. We're not 12 years. And lots of things like that. At the Academy Awards, and he was a man, I think I was on that for the last half a decade or so. Live from the front of Hollywood Night, it's the 84th annual Academy Award. What are we here for? Tell me why.
Everybody that's here has an interest, I would think, in some voice work or characterization, etc. Right? Which hands if you do it? Well, yeah. Good. So let me ask, go back to Adrienne for a second. What would ever influence you, guide you into this madcap business where you do this kind of work?
Insanity.
Insanity. We're in good company with it because we're all going to have something.
No, absolutely. I think all of us are drawn to storytelling in one sense or another. And this is just another version of it. Myself personally, I was involved with on-camera acting before voice work. I sort of fell into voice work because I had done an extensive amount of looping, particularly on Xena. Because it's filmed outdoors, you end up having to sort of dub yourself because the sound is not necessarily always usable. So I ended up, we shot, say an episode takes 8 days, at least 5 of those days of every episode would be outdoors. So every episode I had a lot of dialogue that I had to replace. And it just sort of, I was fairly good at it. Some people have a really hard time with it, and luckily it was within my wheelhouse, and I just sort of grew from there. So that's how I fell into it.
Did you have big influences when you were a kid, and from a standpoint of voice work, you thought, someday I would like to do this?
No.
Okay. How about you? Why would you ever want to jump into the voice portion?
Well, I from before I can even remember, I was mimicking people talking. My mom tells me that when I was like 2 or 3, and I was just learning to talk. My grandfather was from Germany, and he would sit and watch the Kansas City Chiefs football game, and he cussed at it in German.
Nothing's changed.
Apparently, she tells me I would walk around mimicking Grandpa cussing at the television, and my grandfather, when he laughed, he never made a noise. He would go. And I remember him, he would just go. So one day he said, my mom goes, oh, pretty much German accent. But, yeah, I grew up in the golden age of television reruns, and yeah, so I mean, I was sitting at home, after school back when there, there were no computers back then, it's funny to believe, and no internet, and there were 3 TV stations, literally 3, and no cable. So I was watching Hogan's Heroes and Gilligan's Island and all these little reruns, and I would just try to make what I was hearing on TV, and I was good at it. So
your voices make you impressions.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, there's some voiceover people that are the ones I consider to be brilliantly talented because they actually come up with new, cool things. Tom Kane, and SpongeBob, and Billy West. I just recycle the stuff I grew up with. So someone says they need an old cowboy, and we are the ocean, so we go to one night, and they're like, well, that's what we're here. They felt like they think I make it like Powerpuff Girls. That's actually the voice of Gary Owens, who was the figure award goes to beautiful downtown Burbank. They called me back, and I actually said to Gary, I went to Gary Owens, who is still alive, he's still working today, he's 80 years old, but he's still doing voiceover. And that's the way he really talks. People think that's a put on. If I called Gary and wake him up at 3 in the morning, he'd be like, oh, who is this?
So driving through McDonald's is really good.
So I actually said to him, I said, I just auditioned for something, and I kind of did a blend of me and you. Is that okay? He goes, well, let me hear it. I said, now girls, and he goes, that's pretty good.
Did you know him ahead of time?
Oh yeah, I'm curious. I actually did that on purpose. They said we want kind of a dorky, retro, scientist dad guy. And Gary popped in. I just did it, and they liked it. And I actually asked him, I said, he goes, well, as long as you do me well.
How many big fans here of Hanna-Barbera cartoons? The golden age of like what? Spit it out.
Snagglepuss.
Snagglepuss? Okay, who else?
Yogi Bear.
Who? Yogi Bear. Where did Yogi Bear come from?
Well, that was Dawes Butler.
Right. He mimicked.
Dawes? Well, I don't know. Where was he called?
Hey, Ralph the boy. Hey, Hunter and the Cramdens and stuff. I do credit to Fred Stedman. I'm sorry. But those, all the Hanna-Barbera stuff came from mimics who would watch that era of television.
Well, we all, the thing I tell people is, today there are no character actors that can come close to what they used to do because people back then accepted things on television that no audience would accept today. I mean, Lucy, I Love Lucy, was the highest rated show on television in its time. And they had literally about 10 people that would show up for everything. The same guy would be on, the third episode as, this is Ricardo, the hotel manager, check him in. And 3 episodes later, the exact same guy was the bank teller going, this is Ricardo.
This is Carl. He was the banker.
But audiences somehow accepted that. The same actor would show up 3 times in a season. Today, that's never going to happen. Because you're not going to have one guy show up and then 5 episodes later, the same actor, they're like, hey, he was just... So these guys were basically voiceover people. If you you put someone today on the hat, oh no, this is Ricardo, you wouldn't believe it. You'd be like, that's silly. So they're talking about it.
Going back to what you had said, you would see characters like Herb the Viper, who would be the villain on Adventures of Superman, this one, 50s, and you would see him on as a judge on Vetsmoke, you see him on Lucy, they were working. It was a kid.
There were literally like 100 people that did everything.
Exactly. So that's why you're doing this. The interest we have here, are any of you good folks wanting to move into this line of business? But on the way out, so we can see it. That guy's teach school. Okay. Good. You sort of like that. What do you want to do? What influences you? And then what questions would you have of our guests? Really loud in your boy voice. Your big boy voice.
You like voice acting, you like regular acting, but in reality, I just like playing video games and I just love hearing people's voices.
Okay. Okay. Who else? And let's start direct our questions to our guests here. Yes? Real loud, please.
How do you get into that business? Like, right now I'm a teacher and like when I retire, I'll work many years before I actually.
Because there's so much money in it.
Yeah. So, you know, how would you get into it from like having the acting experience or anything?
She's more typical, so ask her that.
And yet I still have absolutely no freaking idea. Like, I don't know, I mean, the best thing I would say is be working on characters, be able to put a reel together, and look for connections and reach out to people. But it is a difficult business to break into. The nice thing about it is you have these pockets around, different parts of the United States, so it's not just LA and New York where you can break in, especially video game companies. You have those in various places, so that's awesome. But I wish I could tell you, but I don't have any idea.
I say this to people not to discourage them, but it's true. It's easier to get into the NBA. Numerically, there are more players in professional basketball than there are people who do cartoons. The entire universe of cartoons that are on the networks and cable are done by literally about 100 people. And about 50 of them do about 75% of the work. So it's like, I meet people all I do. About half the work I do every day from day to day is movie trailers. I do all the Disney, Pixar, It's Toy Story 3. It starts Friday. It's everywhere. It's from the makers of Madagascar. It's the Cruise from DreamWorks. But there's 20 people. There's 20 of us that do all the trailers in the world. In
So
English.
basically, you need to have somebody to take out Tom.
Her path is actually much more normal and typical, where she's an on-camera person, and the same agents that represent people for on-camera work in Hollywood also represent all the voiceover people. And when they find someone like her who has a talent in that area, then they just send them out for auditions and stuff, and she books them. The fact that she's a woman, again, I'm not trying to rain on your parade, you're more likely to get hit by lightning, because the Screen Actors Guild is the big union that takes care of most of our work, and they keep tabs on jobs, and who, by race and ethnicity and stuff, just for paperwork purposes. And the first time women broke the 10% mark, 1 out of 10 voiceover work jobs was only about 7 or 8 years ago. So just by being female, you're limited to 10% of possible jobs out there. So the only area where that's not true is in animation, because women do all the little kid voices. The voice of Bart Simpson is a 55-year-old woman named Nancy who has 4 kids. They just, it's hard to get a real live human child to do what you need them to do in the time you have to do it. So they hire women to do those voices. But other than animation, it's a tough business to get into if you're a woman. So I would say you have to have a plan B, you have an on-camera career, or a rich husband, or
Anybody remember who Yvonne Craig is? Who's Yvonne Craig? Right. And she's doing voice work now. And Kathy Garber. Anybody remember a TV show called Family Affair that's on ETV right now? Bucky, Jody, Sissy, whatnot. Okay. Kathy does voice work now. She does, she's doing some live action things too. She was the voice of Firestar in the Spider-Man cartoon. She's doing commercial stuff, Ford Motor Company stuff. So there's things out here. Are you all local Kansas Cityans or the Forest area? Okay. Anybody here, well, you don't have to, but there's an agency in town that I work called Voices Canada. And for me, I've tried for years and years and years to supplement my income in the corporate day that I have. And it boiled down to going to Micro Center, buying a microphone, plugging it into my Macintosh, and then getting downloaded Audacity, which is free software to do your recording. And I tried to get some demos, sending demos out, and I finally scored a couple of really, really big gigs. But the big gigs don't pay what we thought they were.
Well, no, you can't make a living. Again, it's just reality. You can't make a living doing cartoons unless you are SpongeBob or Bart Simpson. There are a few roles where they're the star, and after a few seasons, they can negotiate some more money. But the people that do animation, that's just kind of icing on the cake, where you actually make your living from day to day as a voiceover person, and I'm in the same boat, is from commercials, and in my case, movie trailers, which, again, movie trailers are like cartoons. You don't say, oh, I want to be a movie trailer guy, because that's just not going to happen. But commercials, it's everywhere. There are commercials in Kansas City, there are commercials in LA, there are commercials everywhere. So you can make some inroads into the commercial world, which is really where all the money comes from. And you can do that in Kansas City. Now, there's not much here. There's only a handful of people, like 5, that make a living at that in a market the size of Kansas City. But
they're scrapping too. I mean, really?
Yeah.
They really are scrapping.
It's tough. Most of their work locally in Kansas City is coming from not even commercials. It's more industrial stuff and corporate generation and stuff like that. But again, I always say someone breaks into the business every year. There's a few new faces in cartoons, and there's another couple of trailer guys, and there's one. So obviously it happens. At one point you did, at one point I did. So it does happen. So there's hope. Yeah.
Can you talk about acting when you're doing voiceover? Because when you say voiceovers like commercials, there's nobody, you're not trying to sync with the character on the screen. There are the directors who tell you what the emotion's supposed to be, those kinds of things. How well that work?
She does on camera, so she can compare and contrast that.
Well, each show is different. Video games, it's almost entirely you on your own. There's always a director and sound engineers and sort of a various team around you, but it's extremely rare that there's other actors that you're directly working with. I've done that a couple of times and made some enormous differences again when that happens, but normally you don't even have a full script, you only have your dialogue, and it is up to the director to give you the context and let you know what's happening to make sure that you're delivering something that's real. Everybody works differently, but for me, I have to make it as real for me as possible. So that's personality, that's my posture, that's I have this weird thing about I have to wear shoes that are appropriate to the character. So if I'm wearing, if it's a soldier, I always wear boots. If it's a sexy character, I think I got my tip. But yeah, there's little things that you do that help because it is weird. You're in a room that's just plain Jane, and you have to make it real for yourself, however that works, which can be ridiculous. Almost every voice job I've done in the last 2 or 3 years, they always have a camera on you also, just for reference for the animators. So God only knows what, that must be the most embarrassing tapes in the history of tapes. Because it's like you're just doing whatever you can do to try to figure it out, and you can't be concerned about what you look like trying to get there to get the sound that you need. But it's real acting.
So is the animation synced to you after you've done the voice, or do you
Oh, yeah.
have to,
Well,
look at the picture, at the animation
they've already done all the animation in Japan, and it's not an anime game. That's just what they're happening to do the animation. So they're not really able to incorporate you, but they just still keep it as a reference. So
Yeah, in all American animation stuff that is on the networks and stuff, they do voices first. Because animators are artists, they're not actors. So they don't have any clue until they hear it when you're going to say, oh, look, there's a head in the room. Or, oh, look, there's a head in the room. I mean, they don't know what to animate to. So, and it's really difficult to do it after the fact. And that's why anime that's made in Japan, that's a whole completely different industry than the mainstream, cartoons. Because the people that are good at that, that's a rare gift to be able to, because these people come in and it's already done. And we call it flap, lip flap. And the flap is Japanese. And it has a completely different cadence, a completely different number of syllables. Like, for instance, Spanish is 20% longer than English. To say the exact same thing in Spanish, on average, is 20% more syllables. So that's why when you hear, usually it's someone making fun of, Spanish television, but it's like, it's because they talk faster to get the same thing in time. And Japanese is the same way. You can't, to be able to get the right cadence and match the lip flap, that's why sometimes it sounds like this. Because in Japanese it makes complete sense. But to try, and the people that can just walk in and they watch it, and they look at the script, and they kind of just massage it, and boom, they do it. And I've tried to do that a few times, and I suck at it. So that's something that is just tough. One time I was called in for a series. I felt bad for these guys. They spent a fortune. It was a puppet thing, like a Muppets thing, and they thought they would do it just like the Muppets, where they mic'd the guys that were doing the puppetry, and of course they weren't the Muppets. It wasn't Sesame Street, and the puppeteers that were doing it from a performance point of view, a vocal performance, completely blew. And so they said, oh, we can't use any of this, so we've got to bring in some voiceover people to replace the puppeteers' voices. Well, it just didn't work. I was there for 2 hours. I was about the 12th guy they brought in kind of match up because, the guys that were doing the puppeteer, they talked every single thing like this, like they were robots, and they just flapped the lip. And what they like, we don't want it to sound like this. We want it to sound like this. But it's not there. And it's just like, yeah, you can do that if you're Frank Oz or Jim Henson or the guys that do Sesame Street. But to come in after the fact with someone who doesn't know what they're doing, can't do it.
More questions? Yes, sir, wait to that.
Just following up on something you talked about, Tom, and you too, Rick. If you are wanting to get into something more regionally in both voiceover work, what kind of, what would you suggest as far as putting a reel together? What kind of stuff do you need to work on?
Well, the main thing I get several reels a week that people ask me to listen to. The big mistake most of them are people trying to get into cartoons. And again, the first thing I say to them is, don't bother. Because number one thing, if you don't live in Los Angeles, not going to happen. So if you're not able to pick up and move to LA, there's no reason to have an animation reel. Because you're not going to get anything. I'm freaking Yoda and Professor Utonium, but I moved away from LA and my animation work has spiraled down to almost nothing. Because they want them there. They want everybody in the room. And it's like an old radio drama. And so, again, if you can't move to LA, don't bother. Because again, that's not an area where you're going to make a living. You need to have a commercial reel. Now you can have some character voices on a commercial reel, sure. But again, most of what is going to make you some money is not. I get people that send me reels where they're doing a Lithuanian accent. I'm like, great. How often do you think you're going to hire for that? How about once in your lifetime? So why waste 10 seconds on a reel? So the other thing
that people make huge mistakes on with their reels is they try to show how witty they are. They like make a Saturday Night Live parody of a commercial and try to like, okay, all that does, if it doesn't sound like a real honest to God commercial, as close as you can make it to sound like something that you might have heard on the air yesterday, it sets off a big red blinking light in the producer's head or the director's head that this guy's not a real working voiceover guy. This is something he cobbled together to get work. I'm not going to be the first sucker that hires him because if he walks in and can't deliver what I think I hear, because they don't know if what you have on your demo reel is something you can just bang, do it 100 times in your sleep, or if that took 2 hours to get that one take that worked. They don't want to be the person to find that out when they're paying for studio time. So put stuff on your reel that is real sounding, that you could replicate without any effort. And again, don't try to show how funny you are as a writer, because they're not hiring you to be a writer. So it's got to be, here, best thing I can tell you, there's a voiceover, there's a site called voicebank.net. And they have on voicebank.net the demo reels of every single working voiceover person in the United States. Hers is there, mine is there, everyone's is there. And listen to those. And if you hear it on voicebank.net and you hear the same kind of thing on 20 different guys' reels, the reason those are there and that sound is there is because that's what's selling. So spend hours, days listening to demo reels on voicebank.net, and you'll start going, hey, I'm noticing some things that are common. That's what sells. So go for that, listen to that, and you can steal it. If you hear something on someone's demo reel that you think you sound like, write it down and go record it and get some music. There's no copyright involved with demo reels. So you can record something on television and go, okay, I can do that, just replicate it.
Anyways, again, in Kansas City, you can go on voicestand.com. What you're going to see is you're going to see a million headshots of those voices. And you're going to see, listen to tons of different demo reels. And it's everybody from channel 4, 5, 9, 41. It's everybody here locally within the 4-state area. There's a lot of competition. That doesn't mean you might not get some work. But I had to tell myself, don't quit your day job. Because it's few and far between. I got hired to be the voice.com. And it was a really good gig. I was thought this would be fantastic. The work to open other doors. Happened in July, the year before last. By November, I hadn't been paid. And after the 20% cut to the agency, it was really small scale. Again, for me to go with the day job. So. Other questions or thoughts? Yes, sir.
Because in voice acting, you don't have the ability to work in facial expression and gesticulations. Do you find that your characters often have to be bigger, their action demands have to be bigger to compensate for that?
It totally depends on the project. I mean, sometimes it's all about real and it's all about subtle and they want nothing, no extra fluff. And sometimes it's definitely about big and broad. So it just completely is, at least for me, it's been specific to the project.
It is one thing that I've run into many times over the years is on-camera celebrities that are wonderfully successful and multi-million-dollar picture guys that come into a cartoon. Usually because they have a kid who's 9 years old and they want to impress the kid. It's not enough that they're Bruce Willis. But he just wants to impress, Rumor or whatever, Dakota or whatever. And it is funny because sometimes they have a really hard time focusing. They're so used to being on stage and emoting and doing and suddenly you're like, hey, you can't do any of that. You've got to do this. If you move your head that much, you can't use it. So if you move your head that, you can't use it. So you got to do this right here. And they go, and they're like, they don't know how to act with just their voice. I did a Rugrats movie, and they brought in someone, a very famous actor, who basically got fired because he couldn't do the voice of Spike, and he had just swamp sweat. The poor guy was just sitting there and to take after, and he could not stop going to the actor next to him because
And they didn't get a single take that was useful because he's like, and he just like, he knew he was failing. They're like, thank you very much, that was great, thanks. Here's your check. You know, they paid him more than I made on the whole movie just kind of for the session. And then they brought in Bruce Willis, who,
Killed him.
More questions, folks? Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned well-known on-camera celebrities. I mean, I tend to have an ear for voices, so I immediately recognize on commercials. That's so-and-so, that's so-and-so, that's so-and-so. Do the people who do this, well, they're getting for a living, even though you can't really make a living on them for commercial, you can. Do they get a little irritated when they bring in some well-known voice?
oh yeah, on our website actually was on Good Morning America. They interviewed me about that exact thing. Celebrities doing.
It's like taking your work away.
Well,
in a way.
It's not just that. But I back in dinosaurs 1 year, I was on the other side of the desk. I was a producer, and I actually hired celebrities to do national network television spots. And I actually told the clients constantly when he was wasting their money. Nobody knows who these people unless it's there's I can count on my hand, you know, unless it's William Shatner, Sean Connery, or Morgan Freeman.
I'm going to say Morgan Freeman.
Nobody recognizes the voice. I mean, John Hamm, and I feel bad because I named him in an article last year. And I was just using him as an example. You know, he does Mercedes-Benz. No, John Hamm is the guy who's on Mad Men.
Right.
And I said, he's a terrifically talented actor. I'm a fan. I watched the show. He's a great guy. But the largest episode ever, ratings-wise, for Mad Men, only had 4 million people watching. There are 120 million television viewers at any given moment. That means 3% of America knows who he is.
Yeah.
And they were paying him $1 million to do a commercial, and it's his voice. I'm like, why in God's name would you spend $1 million to get some guy who only 3% of the country has ever seen or heard? Nobody knows who he is locally. And of course, when they did the article, it was in Wall Street Journal or something. Tom Kane hates John Hamm. I had my agent call this agent and say, no, Tom really doesn't hate you. You're just the example. But no, it is ridiculous because they pay millions of dollars to do something that we would get 1,000 for.
That is true.
And they have no idea.
I have to say in my heart of hearts, I hope that is me one day. I would be so mad. But I agree totally. And I agree with you that you can have an ear for voices and pick them up. But it does
I
also
actually
just
recognize the talking, the character that you were speaking of.
But you're very rare.
Not everybody would.
You're very rare. I use my mom as an example. I call my mom when I hear some celebrity doing something. I pay attention to the Campbell soup ad. Who is that? My mom walked forward and she goes, I'm kind of familiar. Who is that? Like, that's Tim Allen. That's the voice called Campbell soup spots. How do you measure happiness? By the spoonful, whatever. How about by the bowlful? That's Tim Allen. He's making $several million a year to do those. And, you know, because he only has $300 million off of it.
makes me walk around.
Yeah, he takes the money that he makes off that and buys a car.
It's interesting, the ripple effect, because in this market, Dave Ramsey is really, really big, and he's doing local radio spots. Or contractors and roofing places, and people are really sore because that's their bread and butter too. Those who do this, 24/7 for a while.
No, it's not, I'm not angry or bitter about it, but it is ridiculous. I mean, again, the part of the thing that the funny part was, do on my website, you see the interview on Good Morning America, they actually went to Universal Studios with a television monitor and were playing commercials, all of which were celebrities.
Turn it off, please.
I'll call you back in 5 minutes. I'm in a panel.
This is brought to you by Every Sense Burgers. If you're going to go to commercial, we didn't have
We'll go to the commercial break. When they did the article, the piece, they actually took a monitor and played all these commercials with celebrities, George Clooney and Slater and all these things. And not one person could name who they were. Nobody did. Nobody could pick out who they were. The funny part was they edited it so it looked like a couple women were like, oh, that's George Clooney, that's wonderful. What they did not put in the thing was the guy said, what if I told you that was George Clooney? And then the women were like, oh, yeah, that's George Clooney. Oh, he's totally worth it. That was what they put in. They didn't put in the part where they were like, oh, that's George Clooney. Not one person could name who any of these people were, with the exception of Sean Connery.
Yeah.
You know, because of course you know she would be able to translate it.
You say shut up for that.
I can add insult to injury just on one small level that I will share. There's, so far in my career, there's been 2 women who I had voice matched for. So the insult is that they were willing to pay these women a lot of money to do these jobs, and they were either uninterested or unable to take the job, so they hired me to act as them at like 1/20th price. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, no, I do actually. I do ADO for Morgan Freeman. I actually do like all of these commercials. I actually record those first as Morgan Freeman. They use my spots to edit to focus group, to test, and then they bring Morgan in, play my thing. He does it, he reads it twice, and leaves. And I get a few dollars, and he gets nothing done. It was not 7500. I was on my side. I pulled this off one time. I'd done a parody of the thing from famous thing for Robot Chicken, and Seth Green, who makes Robot Chicken, is friends with Alphonse Freeman, this is his son, and Alphonse was in doing something, and he walked in, and they were editing this thing, and he actually he was like, what the? He goes, why didn't you tell me? I could have just, why don't you call me? I would put you in touch with my dad, and instead of this, your dad. He's like, he goes, no, that's not your dad, that's a white guy in Kansas. He's like, oh, come on. He called Morgan, his dad, who was on the golf course, and he held it up to the thing, and he goes, son, that's not me. I said, well, that's not what we're going to do.
So you got a question?
Yeah, since your voice is your bread and butter, do you do anything to kind of protect it?
It's my voice, I don't do that. In general, with guys, the more you abuse it, the better it sounds. The reason I don't do any of the in the world, those kind of trailers, is because the guys that actually do that stuff, they're all old FM disc jockeys who smoke and drink too much, and they turn their cords out, and they sound like that all the time. They're out in the morning. And that's where that sound comes from. I don't smoke, I drink very little. So I don't, my register is just up here. So all the trailers I do are like, the guitars, comedies and stuff. I guess I don't have that in the world thing. And so guys, like I said, generally, you all done, like everybody, you're coming in or out of a cold, and you have this wonderful, bloody resonance. Now's the day I can do Darth Vader. Your Boston tree on Skywalker. That's where that comes from. It's all the post-nasal drip. Get your voice inflamed, and you get this one. Yeah. You can also do that smoking 3 packs a day, but you're going to die, so don't do that. The women, completely different story. You don't want to sound like Selma Diamond.
Not anything in particular, except I'm quite susceptible to cold. The older I get, the more voice work I do, I become a little bit more germophobic, just because it takes you totally out of the game of it.
Right, and then flying, traveling.
Oh, yeah.
That just really bugs me. Whether they work or not, it's like, oh, this is not going to crap.
I will. I had asthma as a kid, so I always tell people, smoking is not an option for me because I'll die. I'm very susceptible to me stuff. And so, of course, when I have a bunch of kids around all the time. But I will, after today, in about 3 days, I'll come down with some kind of, because I'm going to meet 5,000 people and shake their hands, and I'm going to get somebody's blood. And when I find a plane, I get the same thing. Now, in my case, if it's just a little bit of something, it's great. It's cool. Today I'm going to do that Andrea. Hey, you sick. Most people like her, she can't work for 3 days.
Well, and the bigger problem for me is, I mean, I agree with you, like, there's nothing like that, sort of, I just feel a little cold by sending everyone's sexy voice. So that's always nice, but if you can't, when you send in auditions like that, if you can't do that in 2 weeks, you're just wasting your guys' time, so.
Now, that's actually happened to me where I jokingly said to my agent that, because I did, I was coming out with some kind of sick something, or oh my gosh, I was cold that day. I was telling you, in the world, it was like, and I said that exact thing happened. I did something, and I'm like, oh, okay. And they tried to put me on thing, and I couldn't do it. I was just like, well, I was sick. They're like, you should tell us.
Have you ever done female voices and have you ever done male voices for little kids? Crossing that gender line?
I'm not particularly gifted with that. I've done a couple of little boy voices like around 11-ish, but that's not something that I'm particularly good at. I'm good at teenage girls, but when it gets really young, I can't quite do it.
Do you have to do teenage girls in character, or just basically doing just those straightforward teenage girls?
I've done both. For me, it's more about the presentation, and I keep my voice in a certain register, but it's not particularly challenging for me. But for some reason, doing really young kids, my voice is a little too deep for that, even when I try. And I still haven't mastered doing like voices yet better.
The only time I've done anything that is close to gender bending would probably be him on Powerpuff Girls. I can do Julia Child and Captain Pepper. We know
That was great. Other questions, comments? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, really big and really loud.
Out of all the roles that you've ever played, good, evil, potentially great, what was your most favorite?
I think we said it was
probably, yes, it's probably deep voices they don't carry. If you want to be heard in the background, you got to pitch it up a little bit. Yeah. They cut. Probably, well, the weirdest thing I did is probably him on Powerpuff Girls. I mean, basically, it's supposed to be Satan. It's supposed to be the devil. He's wearing stripper boots. He has wooden lobster claws for hands, and he's wearing a Santa Claus outfit from the waist up. That's about the creepiest thing I've ever done. Probably video games. I mean, I've done. I did a couple of pretty crazy people in Batman, Arkham Asylum, and Arkham City. I think when Amadeus Arkham was going insane, that was kind of fun. You got to act because you don't really get to do that a lot. There's so much of what we do in cartoons it's a character, so it's not realistic. And every once in a while, you'll get something, and it's usually, for me, it's been games, where they want something that is not cartoony, and they want something that is, very specific, and they're like Amadeus Arkham, he slowly goes insane, from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. And so I had to actually plan this out. I'm like, okay, well, I got to start off here, and I got to be about here, and I got to be completely back to crazy over here. And so there's an arc, and that just doesn't happen that often for voiceover people, where you actually have to, And it's funny because video games are the area where we are the least paid, and where we are the most anonymous. And people don't really know who the voiceovers in a lot of these games are, but it's the area where sometimes we do our
living without much clothing. But I remember just staring in fascination, because this actually was one of, it was originally a Japanese game, or originally animated and she's, I can't remember if she was rescued or what, but anyway, the lead guy, the guy who the game is about, comes and gets her from her place of employment, and she is
wearing a schoolgirl uniform right now.
she's wearing essentially a bikini and some boots or something. But what was so funny is that they're riding away on a motorcycle that had a pole built onto the back of it. So she could, I guess, dance as they drove.
Look that up. A Harley with a pole.
Yeah. What would you say one of your best memories from working on Star Wars: The Clone Wars is?
Oh, there are a lot. You know, I mean, just the fact that I was doing it was always kind of just a rush. You know, I mean, because I was a fan long before I worked on. The first time I started doing stuff at Lucasfilm was back in the early '90s. And I was on the very first video game I ever made. It was called The Dig, and it wasn't Star Wars. Back when they were on floppy disks, like 5 of them, you know, to get it, and I but I remember the first time, I was just the fact that I was in a recording studio and I'm looking at a script that has Lucasfilm on it, just made me kind of want to eat myself. But then they started hiring me to do Star Wars things, just, TIE Fighter Pilot number 3 and those miscellaneous things. And they found out that I was a good mimic. And they just started saying, well, can you do this? Can you do this? And so I did Tarkin, and I did Akbar. And some of it just stuck. I've been doing Akbar ever since. I mean, if you go to Star Tours and all the Disney parks, that's me. You go, you eat the horse sugar and don't eat that crap, So it just was, like I said, it's just the fact that I was doing it. I mean, it's sort of a split personality thing. Like, while I'm doing the work, I'm trying to do the very best Yoda I can, or the very best Akbar I can, or whatever. But then afterwards, you're like, wow, I just did that. And then, how did that happen? So, yeah, I mean, it's a completely different proposition when you're coming up with like she does, it's new things, and she comes up with something, and whatever she comes up with is, they go, wow, that's we like that take. What she did, we like her, so they hire her. But when you're being hired to do something that is already established, like Yoda or Akbar, your job is to absolutely not put your spin on it. You just have to try to make it as close as you can. And that was tough with Yoda, because there were a lot of, as the director said to me one time, we were like, how do you say this? How do you say this? And, we usually were like in sync. But there were times when it was like, we'd like to have her try out a few different ways. And how would Yoda say that? Because, as he said to me about halfway through season 1, he said at this point, he goes, you've spoken more dialogue as Yoda than all the other movies. So it was really weird. Georgie, in one part, he goes, he knows Yoda better than I do. There was one episode where I always tell the writer, we call it Yodis, the backwards talking on the dog. We're like, don't put it in Yodis, just write it in English, and I'll make it right. And but sometimes they'll write it in Yoda, and sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, and I'll change it to fix. And usually Dave's, again, hit perfectly in sync. He's got Yoda in his brains like I do. And we're like, one time it was just wrong. I'm like, no, it's not very safe. So I read it the way I thought. He goes, well, it's something he's never done. He goes, well, go ahead, let's pick it up as written. I don't know, it's not weird. You wouldn't say that like that. He goes, well, let's just write down a couple as written. George wrote it. As I was saying, that's exactly. But the fun part is what went onto the air, what actually ended up on the screen was what I and Dave came up with. George heard it and goes, yeah, that's better.
That's a good question for you before we wind it up. We'll start with Adrienne. With great respect to what we've done so far, what would be your dream voiceover, your dream voice script? And then continue.
Really profitable
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
And you, Tom?
I mean, this is close to my heart, but for guys who are my age, it's Darth Vader. I mean,
a sister. You have a twin sister.
Now let's give a big hand to our guest.